design cables for guitars, do work for Vox, I do lawyer cables, I do cables for Fender. I also have a business partner who used to work for me in China that makes amplifiers for, we did the vintage modified Bandmaster, we've done some Fender amps, we make PRS amps, we make Blackstar amps, we make Supro amps, one of which is over there. That came from my factory, that amp over there. Yeah. Part owner of a cable factory in China. And so I use all these instruments to voice cables, basically. And
very cool.
It's become part of my business, really. I was in a lot of bands that had really good potential. The problem was, you know, musicians are unreliable, and we had so many personnel changes all the time. Finally, I just gave up. I said, this is ridiculous, you know. Looking for a new drummer every couple of months, or a new guitar player, or, you know, can't find a keyboard player. You know, it just got to be a lot of trouble. Plus, you know, I have an engineering background, so it was pretty easy to go into that career. So.
How long have you been doing cables?
25, 30 years. Yeah. Most of them are generic, and most of them are just video cables. Started out in the 60s where guys from the US would go to China and say, I want a guitar cable. And they had no design background or idea of how to design one. And the factories over there would just say, well, yeah, you can use this, you know, and they'd give them a video cable. So initially, the Planet Waves, DiMarzio, all of those kind of cables, and we make the Planet Waves cable. It's a video cable, but that's what they wanted. They wanted cheap. You know, a video cable is good for high frequencies. It's not good for mids. It's not good for lows. Yeah, well, the other thing too is every conductor gauge sounds different, and when you start combining different gauges, you get different kinds of sounds.
Interesting.
You know, and then stranded cable versus solid core cable, totally different sound.
Can I have you build me a cable?
I brought you a bunch of them. Right there, that's your early Christmas present.
You're kidding. Really?
Yeah, I did.
For guitar?
Yeah, a whole bunch of cables.
Are you serious?
In this bag, yes. Those are all my designs.
Well, I'm gonna, wow, thank you. That's awesome. Holy cow, look at that. So is it all guitar, or is there speaker cable too?
They're all guitar. If you want
It's all
speaker
guitar.
cables, I'll bring you some next time.
I need speaker cables, like,
Okay.
from my personal,
Right,
not
yeah,
to sell,
sure,
but
sure. So if I do the manufacturing and the design,
wow.
and then Vox,
I
and
didn't
Fender.
I didn't know you did this.
Well, that's my business. I designed that
Oh, my
cable
Lord.
too. That's my favorite guitar cable right there.
This one.
Yes.
More so than what's in this Ziploc bag.
Well, they all sound different, and
that cable looks like.
your mileage will vary. That's the top of the line Fender guitar cable, the one with the metal connectors.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the Platinum series.
Okay, so out of all this, if I want to use I want to use the best cable that you brought.
Well, I like this the best.
Right there.
The last time Guitar Player Magazine did a cable roundup, this one made it to the winner's circle. That was one of the best ones they picked.
So it's going to transfer the best EQ and frequencies for my guitar.
It's voiced for guitar.
Nice.
Big time.
Well, that's killer. I didn't know that.
Well, that's why I have all these guitars. It's like I got to see what they're all going to sound like with different cables. I got to voice the cable to sound good with any guitar.
You're a deep guy.
Or any bass.
I didn't know all this. Holy cow, man.
Well, this is how I earn a living.
My wife's got a lot to compete with for Christmas now. This is killer. Thanks,
Yeah,
man.
quite well. You know, I got a garage full of these. I got bins and bins.
Love cables.
Full of cable.
I'm in the search of a really good speaker cable, and I have to tell you that I'm hurting on seriously.
I've got some at home, but I'm working on some new ones that are going to be better. Right now I'm working with Aguilar, the bass amp company, to do a line of cables. I'm working with Vox to do some higher end cables, including a 12 gauge speaker cable. And I'm also working with Taylor Guitars now to do a whole line of cables. Yeah. Nobody appreciates them though. They're hard to sell. They don't want to pay, you know, more than a generic price for a microphone cable, and I don't know why. You know, the same thing applies with microphone cables. You don't want a stranded cable because it adds distortion and it adds like graininess to the sound. It takes away clarity. I want a solid core conductor, and I've designed special microphone cables for PMI, the guys that make the Trident mixer. They did, you know, they have a whole Pro Tools setup, did a bunch of recordings using a Mogami microphone cable, and then the same thing using a microphone cable that I designed. All of them were incredulous. They all said, I'll never use Mogami again, oh my God. You know? And they played it back for me too, and it was really interesting. It was a huge difference, you know, night and day.
Feel about lava.
Junk.
All right, that's what I'm using right now, folks. I'm ready to switch.
Well, I'm curious to hear your take on the cables I gave you. Okay.
I'm curious to hear it.
Yeah. I want to get some feedback from you, definitely. Spend some time listening to it and let the cables break in, because there is a break-in time. Because the dielectric material, like a capacitor, has to charge. So you have to have a signal going through it for a while to build up.
So I have to break it in?
Yeah, you have to break the cables in. They will not sound the same after like 20 hours of use versus, when they're cold right out of the package.
I'll be darned.
Well, it's like a capacitor. Capacitors have to form as well. They need a voltage going through them, before they operate, at their peak efficiency. So cables are the same thing, because a cable is, in effect, a capacitor. It's capacitance, inductance, and resistance. So you have to charge the dielectric material. So cables need time to break in.
I take it you have all different pickups that you use for testing out your basses?
Yeah, you have to have, a variety. You got to have a precision. You got to have jazz bass. You got to have whatever. So I've got a lot of different basses. It's a little more critical with guitar because there's not as many variations of bass pickups out there, or basses really. But being a bass player, I have a lot of basses because I just like it. But also it comes in handy, testing, I'll try all of them basically.
Do you also play guitar to test out all that stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Well, I started playing guitar 2 years before I started playing bass when I was like 12 years old. Because back then, and this is weird, and I've talked to other bass players who are the same age as me, and some of them tell me the same thing. People said back then that if you want to play bass, you have to learn guitar first. It's complete bullshit, because it's not the same instrument. A bass is like an acoustic bass or a string bass, which actually I played, by the way, in high school. It's a whole different instrument. The music notation is different. Bass clef. And one of my pet peeves is when people call it a bass guitar. It's not a guitar. It's a bass.
I actually wrote that on your invoice, bass guitar.
Well,
I'll scratch that
I'll
out.
choose to ignore that. Back in the day, they called it Fender bass. They said a Fender bass. And I've even seen that in credits on old records, from the 50s or 60s. It'll have the guy's name and it'll say Fender bass. Because back then, that was it. I mean, Fender, pretty much revolutionized or, made the electric bass a standard instrument, which didn't exist before. Sometimes it feels so foreign when I pick up a guitar after I've been playing. Pretty much I play bass every single day. Guitar, not really, maybe once a week or something like that.
Do you make that Blackstar combo? It's called the Pro. It's the one that Waddy
Watch or whatever.
he uses.
Yeah. See, I'm part owner of a cable factory in China, okay? I used to work at Monster Cable. I was in charge of product development there for 5 years, and eventually I started forming relationships with some suppliers in China, ended up becoming a part owner of a cable factory, and we started a side business that I was a shareholder in also called Gen X, and we were making amplifiers for a lot of people. We made amplifiers for Fender and a lot of other companies, Vox, Blackstar, PRS. The guy that founded the amp company, the electronics company, used to work for me. He was my employee at the cable factory. We formed the electronics factory as an offshoot. Eventually he left and started, his own business with several of the engineers, and that became another business for me as well.
Manufacturing's moved to China. Are you all using like the same companies to build stuff?
Pretty much, and a lot of it is I'm involved with because I've got my fingers in a lot of different things because of my relationships over the past 30 or so years. You make a lot of contacts in business, and a lot of times people leave one company and go found another company or go work at another company, and then you got that connection and on. So, basically I can make almost anything, in China now with all of the contacts and business partners that I have over there. It's just from, living over there for many, many years. And I have an apartment there. I have a home in Taiwan. My wife is Taiwanese, in Asia most of the time. Here now because of the pandemic. Normally I would be in China. My office is in China. I go back and forth to Taiwan. Like I said, we have a home in Taiwan. So.
All your guitars that you were talking about, are those over in China?
Here.
Or, oh, it's all here.
Well, I always have a reason to come back here. All of my R&D work is done here. It's too difficult, to have a bunch of expensive instruments over there, as well as amplification and everything else. It's just too much stuff involved. I have literally a house full of stuff, So it's just just too difficult. Plus keyboards, I play keyboards too, so words too. You know, and a whole collection of vintage drum machines, including a Linn drum. So,
How long have you lived in Vegas?
not long, 5 years now. In LA for about 12 years, and before that in San Francisco for 7. So I've been in California. I'm an escapee from LA. Just, you know, it's an interesting thing. You know, there's been a definite migration, there's no question. Well, it's gotten really bad in California. I had to get out. We were living in Redondo Beach, and you know, it was a sleepy little beach town when we first moved there. So crowded, you know, all these developers kept buying, you know, these 40s bungalows that had a detached garage on a big lot, tear it down and build like 3 condo units or so. And the population exploded, and it got to the point where we couldn't even go to the supermarket without sitting in bumper to bumper traffic. Who needs that? It wasn't like that when we moved there. So, plus the taxes are crazy, you know, it's like we pay half the taxes here than we did there on a house that's a lot bigger, you know, plus we did make a killing on selling our house there, but, you know, that was a good move, you know. It helps my business too, because the taxes here on small business are 0, so it all worked out really well.
That's
for
good.
us here. You know, it's more laid back. I like the weather, you know. In Redondo Beach, it was always freezing cold. At night, you'd have to wear a parka, you know. I mean, it was cold. So I don't like cold too much. Deal with the heat. Gave it up in the late 80s, I guess it was. I've got a lot of tapes, studio recordings and stuff, and did some recording when I was living on the East Coast. Originally, I'm from New Jersey. We played in clubs in New York, New Jersey area. CBGBs. I saw the Ramones live on occasion, you know, stuff like that. I was really into the whole punk new wave kind of thing. So, did some recording. I have a lot of material I've written over the years, and I've got a backlog of stuff. And I still got studio tapes and things like that. I'm gonna have to do something with it eventually. My studio's not set up. I've got it all in boxes. No, I think a lot of this material that I did back then could be reworked for today, you know what I mean? Kind of what my goal would be. Got a lot of songs that I think would be really cool because I would take another look at it and, you know, change things around a little bit, you know, that kind of thing. But I've got some tapes of live performances we did with bands too, and that's a real hoot to listen to. It's great.